And as ever, here I am again with my powerful woman of this time, who is a friend, Joan Lind. And I ran into Joan on what to me is one of the best networking groups ever, called Unique Ladies. And if you remember, if you watch Suzy Orr's episode, she's the lady who started it. And Suzy introduced me to Joan, who does the most amazing thing, which I now use. And it's a thing called trybooking. But before we get into that, because we really must, because it's so good and so interesting, we were just talking about where we both come from and about London and about going there this last weekend and things like that. And she asked me where I lived. So I said, well, I lived in Clapham for a while and then I lived in Balham. And hand it to you, Joan. Balham.
Oh, do you want me to pick up from there?
Yeah.
Well, it was a short story. So, hello, everybody. First of all, thank you to Ellen for inviting me to do this podcast with her. It's an absolute treat. And Ellen and I have just a tiny chit chat before this. So a lot of this is going to be new to her and new to me, which makes it a much more interesting, hopefully, adventure for the next, few minutes or up to an hour. So look, my accent probably tells you I'm not from London. And you'd be absolutely right. So I'll tell you my little tale, how I ended up in London, in Balham, where Ellen also started her life in London. I started in the same place before I moved north of the river, but more of that shortly. So look, I am, first of all, the daughter of a minister in the Church of Scotland. And we always have a chuckle about that because we used to go camping as a family, all over the UK initially, and then when I was older, into Europe, because my father was insistent he wouldn't take us abroad until we knew our own country, something I'm forever grateful for. And we'd arrive at these campsites and, people around the barbecue, so what do you do? Dad would say, I'm a minister. And it would be really funny because most people got it, but some people assumed he was a political minister, not a religious minister. So we always had to, after this first year, to qualify and say, well, I'm a minister in the Church of Scotland, which means I'm a vicar in England, So Dad did his theology in Edinburgh. He was an Edinburgh boy, but his first parish was in the Highlands, which is where myself and my brother were born. So
where in the Highlands, she says, interrupting you, because I love the Highlands.
Yes, well, I do absolutely say I'm a Highlander, because that was my upbringing. And I lived in a place called Bewley, which is northwest of Inverness. So I really am a true Highlander. I'm not one of these Perthshire or Aberdonian Highlanders. I am, from near the capital of the Highlands. I was educated in Inverness. So that was that. But with both my parents coming from Edinburgh, we went to Edinburgh a lot. I loved Edinburgh. And to be honest, when I was at school, I was bright. I knew what I wanted to do in terms of university. All I knew was it had to be in Edinburgh. No, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life particularly, apart from go to Edinburgh and then probably travel. So that's what I did. And I did my studies in Edinburgh. I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I met this lovely woman. And this is now back in the late 80s. And she was a headhunter in London. But she just moved her business back to Edinburgh. She was a Scot. And she set up a new concept of recruitment agency or headhunter. She called herself a headhunter, but same thing. And it was all about interviewing people on their personality, not their skills or their academics, which I completely concur with. And it's a big part of what we do here, because it's all about culture, and the people we hire have to be a cultural fit first. Anyway, back to that later. So she said in that interview, have you thought about advertising agencies? And I went, oh no, being the daughter of the man. So I thought, oh, that's far too frivolous. And, that's not I'm bringing the world a great deal of, So, but anyway, she sent me off. And to cut a long story short, she started me on a fantastic 25-year career working in global ad agencies in Edinburgh, London, and Sydney. And that is what took me to London in the early 90s.
And so where were you in Balham then?
So, oh gosh, are you going to ask me that? I can picture the street. I'd have to get a map up. It was about a 10-minute walk from Balham Station.
Right.
Southwest, very, there's lots of long Victorian terrace streets, aren't there?
Yeah.
So one of those.
Right.
So what happened was, when I arrived in London, one of my mum's friends was a producer at the BBC, and she had a flat on the Thames, to which she said, send Joan down here and she can base here till she gets herself set up. And it was actually through my advertising friends. And there was an advertising guy, this house in Balham, and he let 3 of the bedrooms out. He was an older guy, like I'd be in my mid-20s, and he was probably in his late 30s. So I started there and I rented a room in that place for about, I don't want to say 6 months.
Right.
But I was working for an ad agency called Young and Rubicam, who were based in Camden. And whilst I didn't mind the Northern Line up and down between Camden and Balham, actually I found a flat in Camden Square, which was walking distance from the agency.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah. 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 No, I always stayed south of the river all the time I was there, but I knew quite a lot of people up in Camden and that sort of area. And so, yeah, but I was there for 25 years. So I got to know London quite well.
Yes, I was there for 10 and still am, because I've still got a base in London where I was at the weekend.
Yeah.
And bizarrely, whilst I'm in southwest London, it's still north, well, it's west of the river, it's the north side of the river, but I'm in a little area called St Margaret's, just opposite Richmond on the Thames. So I
know that. Yeah. Yeah.
I get to London quite frequently, which I love.
I think I'm probably not so keen anymore now, but it was amazing when I lived there. I just loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too. And that's actually, I never thought I'd leave, because that's sort of the story into how I got to be trybooking, because I was at Young and Rubicam from 1990 to 1994. And I was running accounts like Colgate Palmolive and all sorts, and UIP Films. And I got headhunted, and a lovely ad agency called AMV, which is a really well-known agency, had just won the British Telecom account. This is in April 1994. And I got headhunted there to staff up. And that was just an amazing shift change. And actually, I could still have been at that agency because it was just fabulous. But I'd always wanted to live overseas.
So you went overseas?
I did.
Where?
I went to Sydney in Australia at the very start of the millennium. So I resigned from my post in London in the August of 99 and worked my 3-month resignation. And then on the 4th of January 2000, arrived in Sydney to work with M&C Saatchi. And I was there for 13 years.
Yeah. And how did you like Australia? Because I've got friends down there and I've never actually visited them yet, but
you need to. So are your friends down there British, European, or other?
Yes. One of my best friends is a black guy from New York who runs a super business coaching agency, a lot of it online and a lot of it in East Asia. And he lived in Sydney for a long time, most of the time that I knew him, which was about 20 odd years. And then he moved up north to Cairns, and he's been up there for just about a year. And
nice.
See these pictures, and it's sort of like, oh.
Beautiful part.
And I've got another friend, and I can't remember the name of cities now, down in the south.
Melbourne.
Sorry?
Melbourne.
No, I don't know anybody in Melbourne, but south in the middle. Australia sort of goes round the corner, up in the middle, and then down on the end, and it's sort of about there.
Adelaide.
Yeah, friend there, and couple sort of spotted around the place, and they keep saying, when are you coming? And so far it has been not yet, but I really get on that thing.
I'm going to show you something.
Right. Well, you are when I let you share the screen. There you go.
Oh no, you don't need to share the screen.
Oh right.
You don't need to share the screen. I'm going to put it up on my phone. So having lived in the city for 13 years, you can imagine I've got lots of European, British, and Aussie friends. Well, if I was to tell you, these pictures were sent to me this very morning from my girlfriend who's Aussie, and she's taken a year out with her new husband. Her first husband died very tragically and very unexpectedly 5 years ago, and she had a little girl, and she's since remarried, and they've taken a year off just to circumnavigate the whole of Australia.
How lovely.
And this was them this morning on a beach on Western Australia with nobody else on it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Isn't that phenomenal?
Isn't that just so glorious? And the blue,
Not
the
another
greens and the
human
whites.
being.
No. And
Not another human being on it. And then if I scroll up, there you go. That's them in the sea. Nobody else in sight.
yeah.
So that is the thing. So I can't encourage you enough to go. That's the first thing. I know two camps of people. The camp, both, and particularly in Britain and Europe, the camp of people say, oh, I'm not interested in Australia. It doesn't really do my thing. There's so many more interesting places. And of course there are. I don't disagree. And there's the other camp that go, oh, I've always wanted to go. I'd love to go. And I've met people from both camps in Sydney and in Australia, and both camps always love it.
Yeah.
The ones that think they're going to love it even more than they could have possibly imagined. And the ones that thought they wouldn't go, I had no idea it would be like this. It's so much more than I was expecting on every level. So I've yet to meet an unhappy visitor.
Well, that's what I've found from my friends, and one Australian friend who now lives in Bangkok, for goodness sake, but that's fine. And they're all, it's the sort of people they are, which is so nice as well. And they're all very open.
Yes.
Yes. They're very pleasant to be with and have strong opinions and strong attitudes, maybe, but then in no way they're okay with it. And they're okay if, I sort of say, well, actually, I'm not quite sure about that. And they go, that's fine. And you so often get people who try and talk you into their way of speaking. And certainly the people that I've met in Australia, they haven't. They've sort of said, oh, well, we disagree. That's fine. And they're quite happy to leave it. So, yes, I'll have to get on that plane somehow or another.
I would highly recommend it. And the nicest time to go, I think, is February, March, April. So the end of their summer coming into their autumn.
Yeah, that would be it for me, really, because I can't do the heat of summer at all.
Also, it'd be very wet.
Yeah.
It can be very, very wet. So, and very, very hot. And as you've seen on the news, that's when they're prone and that to the terrible fires or the terrible floods.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they've been spared. They've had some terrible floods recently, but thankfully they've been spared those horrendous fires. 2019.
Yeah. No, I sort of feel that time of year would be the best time for me. And I've got another friend who's just come back from a month there. And she really enjoyed it. So it's all happening all around me. But when you were there, this is how you got into this amazing trybooking thing. So what happened?
So I'll tell you what happened. So I arrived in 2000, single, career girl in my early 30s. And that was the way I always imagined it to be. I didn't have any big desire to have kids or be married. But then I met my English husband through mutual friends, not actually in Australia, but as in that hiatus between me deciding I was going and actually going, we met at a joint wedding. And it's him that's brought me back to the Lake District in particular. So what happened was Henry and I met, and then we really hit it off when I moved to Australia. We got engaged a year after I arrived. We got married a year after that. And I had a baby in 2004. So I've got two Aussie children. So I was a busy working mum because I was running brands that you would all know at M&C Saatchi, British Airways, Qantas, Audi. I worked with Rupert Murdoch's for my sins. And I saw all sorts of interesting adventures. And I was a busy corporate working mum. And if I'm honest, I never thought I'd leave Australia, if I'm honest. But then my mum died very suddenly in Edinburgh, just as I was about to give birth to our second child. And I'd always been, I could jump on a plane at lunchtime in Sydney and be back in Edinburgh for breakfast. But this all happened at a time I couldn't jump on a plane. And because I was having a baby, I had to wait 12 weeks for her passport. So it was actually almost 3 months after my mother's passing that I actually got back, which was like, whoa, you know.
Yeah.
And there was lots in place. So I was able, we did lots of really interesting things because mum was the way she was. She'd actually written out her funeral service. So it was an absolute gift because I was able to have that in Sydney. I was at my church in Sydney at the same time as her funeral was happening in Edinburgh. So that was a gift.
Mm.
Then my husband's mum had battled cancer most of her adult life brilliantly. And she got another tumour in 2012. And we thought, you know, we've already lost my mum. We are, when it comes to things like this, you are a long way from home. So we just bit the bullet. We're both in our mid-40s. And we just bit the bullet and said, it will all work out, but let's just get back and be there for them. And we didn't know how sick Henry's mum was going to be. So we made the decision in October of 2012, and we'd moved back here wholesale by the April of 2013. Now, in that process, because we knew we went, do we go back to London, where our professions are, where we've got a little house, where we can start again? Not really. I'm not sure it was great for the kids.
Yeah.
Do we go to Edinburgh, where my father's close to, and that was a serious contender, or do we come to the Lake District where Henry's parents were, where we knew we could help them, you know, the most, and it seemed it absolutely seemed the right thing to do. We thought it would be the easiest for the children as well. So substitute beaches for fells and lakes, which has worked really well. So that's what we did. So in the process of that move, which only took us 6 months, we're going, what do we do in the Lake District?
Well, yes.
What do we do with our, not do what do we do, because there's lots of lovely things to do, but what do we do with our skill set in the Lake District, which is not, there's not a lot of advertising agencies, and there's not a lot of global telecommunication companies in the Lake District. So with our skill set and our experience, what do we do? And that's where trybooking came in, because I was using trybooking to book all my tickets in Australia. So it was school concerts, it was charity events, it was business events, it was sports clubs, you name it. And I just loved it because I'd, you know, leave work quite late. I normally didn't leave the office till about 7. And I'd have all the emails in my inbox from schools or whatever, or charity fundraising event. And I'd just go click, 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 book and pay my ticket. And by the time I got off the ferry, I had my tickets in my inbox. I didn't have to worry about it again. No forms to fill in, no cash to have to manage. It was just all done. So it was actually, I used to, you know, rave on about it. And it was actually Henry, my husband, said, that trybooking thing you really like. He said, I've had a look into it and it's a cloud-based business. I said, and what does that mean?
Yes.
This is back in 2013.
Yeah.
What it means is you can run it from anywhere. I said, okay, that sounds interesting. And he said, you've got all the skills for it. I said, yeah, I do like it as a platform. So I wrote a good old-fashioned letter to the CEO in Melbourne and said, this is my background, this is my experience. I have no idea if this would interest you or not, but I'd be interested in having a discussion about launching this platform in the UK. And I got a phone call within a week, and we had a meeting within the following week in Melbourne. And we agreed a setup, which means I run the British company. It's a private limited company. I'm listed on Companies House. We run the business as we see appropriate and fit for the UK market and our UK customers, and including re-engineering the pricing strategy. And I run it here, and we have a wonderful relationship with Australia, who are real partners.
Yeah. And this is how I found you, because there you were talking about this thing, and I am one of those people who's never really got on with Eventbrite. I mean, I use it because, you know, there's a ticket for something that you want and that kind of thing. And I tried it for some of my own stuff. Oh, this is really hard work, and I'm not quite sure what to do about this. And there wasn't anybody to ask. And it was sort of, you put onto these pages full of instructions, and that had already tangled your brain before you even started. So, you know, I don't need any more of that. I just want a person. And
exactly. Quite right.
So it was sort of like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about this. And then there's Joan. And of course, I'm like, what she got? And so I got involved, and I'm just going to crow about this for a moment, because I had no idea what I was doing, but I had an event that I wanted to run. So I sort of got in there and messed about with it and got started. And I thought, no, I need a person. Oh my God, there's a phone number, which is, I mean, you all know what that's like at the moment. You just don't see phone numbers. So I thought, I'll ring it. God knows where I'm going. And I get this lovely, I think Lancashire lass.
Yeah, not me, I hasten to add.
Well, it was not Joan, lovely Lancashire lady. And she said, okay, my dear, what can I do for you? How can I help you? And it was like, oh, breath of fresh air. Because and she stayed on the phone with me for nearly an hour, and it was all sorted. And that is what I call customer service, which takes us back to what you were talking about, cultures and things like that. And, now it's like, well, if I'm going to have an event or something like that, then I need trybooking. I'll book it on there. And I don't have to think about it. I can attach it to my website. I can do this, that, and the other thing with it. And it's there. And it's the culture thing. And we were talking about this on Unique Ladies last time, weren't we? About how hiring people for the culture makes a difference. You do this, don't you?
Do you know, this is one of the most valuable lessons I took out of my advertising career, because I was very blessed. I worked for 3 incredible agencies, all of them quite different, but all of them incredible in their own way, full of brilliant, inspiring people. But all of them had one thing in common. They all recognized that they didn't have factories that produce widgets. They didn't have products to sell. Everything about their organization was in the people within the organization. So where the ideas were coming from, where the management's coming from, where the project management was. So they recognized all of their capital was going up and down in the lift every day. So it was all about people. And I was very involved in the graduate recruitment process at AMV in London and at M&C Saatchi. I was very involved in the recruitment, because the other thing is ad agencies don't have HR departments. They may well do now. And I've not been in advertising now since 2013. And I imagine a few of them do have HR departments, but everybody was so good at putting their people first, they almost didn't need them. People were very well managed. And culture was absolutely one. And every agency's got its own different cultures, but they'd hire by culture, because you wouldn't get, if you were of the wrong culture, it wasn't going to be great for you, and it wasn't going to be great for them. So for me, it's about finding people that we think are culturally going to be a strong fit and add to the culture that's there. And we've got all sorts of different. I mean, I'm delighted. I've just hired my most recent hiring, and this is now our 3rd week. She's an American. She's from Philadelphia. She speaks like Michelle Obama, and she looks like Whitney Houston. She's absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
So she's got another whole amazing culture of her own to the organization. But first and foremost, she had to be a good cultural fit with us, and us for her. Otherwise, she's not going to enjoy it.
No.
One of the things that we did was, we do with everybody we hire is we give them at least one day of what we call just not a training day, but it's a trial day. And then, because as you know, if you're interviewing a company, you're interviewing us as much as we're interviewing you.
Yes, that's something that's really important too.
Really important. You're interviewing us. So is this what we want? And I often say to people, look, this is our offices. This is what we're all about. This is the whole team. And it'll either be for you or not. And come and do a trial day, and you'll know by the end of it if it's. So this lady didn't just come for one trial day, she came for 3.
Woo!
Because it was such a shift change from anything else she'd done. And I said, I want to make sure you really understand, just what we're about. And if you're here for 3 days, then you'll get a really good cross reference to what a normal week looks like. And that's what she did, and she loved it.
You see, I think that's so important. I was talking to a couple of people last week, and they were talking about corporate. They're all in the branding side of our vague industry, and they were talking about how they'd been in corporate before, and how they really didn't feel listened to. They felt as though they were supposed to sort of squidge themselves into the company's box, even if they didn't fit them, and that if they sort of said, well, how about we do so and so like this, it was like, oh no, we've always done it like this.
You've touched on a topic I'd like to come back to.
Please, let's set it off, because that was part of my idea, because I think it's just vitally important that this subject comes up.
Yes, that whole thing about, oh, we don't do it like this, we've always done it like this. Can I say, back to the Australia point, when I got back, and it still happens today, people say, oh, you must miss Australia, you must miss the weather or the beaches. I go, no, clearly it was beautiful weather, beautiful beaches. But the thing I like British weather, I like the change of seasons, we have beautiful beaches here, but the thing I miss the most, and you touched upon it, Ellen, the thing I missed the most is the lack of the reserve that we have here. I had totally forgotten about this great British reserve, which manifests itself in so many different ways. And you've just identified one. Oh, we don't do it like that. We always do it like this. We've always done it this way. So they've been able to bring on new ideas and try new things. The Aussies, the Asians, lots of other cultures are great at it, but we're not.
Yeah. And I think it's this, and both of these women that I was talking to, they're both living in America in different parts of it. And they say they have that problem there.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right.
And that it is such a hindrance, because it actually stultifies the company.
Yes.
And somebody can't bring in a new idea. And if somebody's just sort of, one of your team is just saying, well, how about we do it like this instead? And if nobody's ever tried that before, how is anybody going to know whether it's or not?
Exactly.
And it needs that kind of opening up.
Yes, and that's one of the joys of starting a company like this, because we're constantly. I've got within my team, I've got a 19-year-old, soon to be 20, student. He's got a brain the size of Britain. He's absolutely fabulous boy, and he has all sorts of ideas. And I've said, run with them. There's a couple have said, no, we're not going to run with that. But on the whole, he gets to run with them, and he sees how they play out. So he had one idea, and he didn't quite get the results he hoped for. And I said, yeah, but it was worth trialing. But we know, and we thought that might happen, but that's not the point. We've now done it, and you've now got, so, within reason. I mean, I don't let people go off, they've got to be on brand, but absolutely, I invite new ideas and new things to test from my team all the time.
Yeah. And it's funny, because I'm going right back, as I said, I lived in London for 25 years, for ages, and absolutely ages it felt like. And I worked for the Ministry of Defence. Now, you think the Ministry of Defence would be very stultified and stuck and jammed in. And, maybe some parts of it are. I didn't find that very much. And I was in charge, I was a software boffin, software engineer. And I ran a team and of, people, coders and admin staff generally, and people who just generally looked after our paperwork, all sorts of levels and people. And we worked as a team in those days, and a lot of people did. And so you got a problem, and somebody come back and, oh, Ellen, so-and-so got so-and-so coming in, and they're really upset about such and such, and la 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 la, and all this sort of stuff. And so, well, have you tried something? No, nothing works. Okay, so heads up, everybody, table. And because we had a big table in the middle of, we had an enormous room that we were all in, and you'd always get one of the coders who say, give me 10, I can't stop. Which, if you know anything about programming and coding, you can't. He's sort of like, no, not now. Right, we'll put the coffee on. And 10 minutes later, the person would come and get around the table and say, this is the problem. We've got so-and-so happening, and it's such and such, and they've got this deadline on. Ideas, people. Come on. Let's imagine we're on Mars. How are we going to do this? And the ideas would come from everybody. Including, we had a young lassie of sort of 16 who looked after we had lots of paper files in those days, and she looked after all of our paper files for us. We couldn't have done it, but she was brilliant at it, and she'd come up with an idea which was perfectly workable, but it so worked. And I gather that not that many people in big corporates do that kind of thing anymore. What What is your experience?
Oh, well, gosh, I'd like to think they do. I mean, that was the whole epicenter of an ad agency culture. You know, I've always been a team player. So when I was at school, I always was, the team sports. I wasn't the swimmer or the tennis player. I was the basketball or hockey. I was always team. And that's what I love about advertising. It was all about team. And I often get asked by corporate clients, would I go the other side and become a client? And I'd always say never. And they go, why not? So it's shorter hours, you get paid more. I said, maybe so. But what I love about working for ad agencies is that the whole team at the ad agency are in the boat rowing in the same direction.
Yes.
Because we're all about getting the best ad campaign for you as a client and your customers.
Yeah.
Whereas on the client side, I used to see so many different agendas. The head of marketing might want one thing, the head of sales might want another, and the CEO might want another, and the new marketing manager might want something else. So a big part of that was bringing all those agendas and people together to be united around the vision that the agency had for them.
Yeah.
So, I've seen it in different ways, and I think it depends what type of organization you're in. But I think no matter what organization you're in, that kind of team spirit has to shine through. Otherwise, corporates just don't exist.
Well, that's my feeling. So, I mean, I'm solopreneur now, so I haven't got people working for me. I've got people I outsource to, but it's not quite the same, although it still is a team thing in that sense that the man who looks after all my podcast stuff sort of says, Ellen, have you done such and such? Have you sent me such and such? Have you done this sort of thing? Yeah, okay, John, I'm just doing it now, and it all happens. But it's really, I would hate to work in a company where you couldn't ask everybody and actually even go back to the senior bosses and sort of say, look, I know you want to do this, but it's just not going to pan out. It's just not going to happen. How are you going to change that? And we could do that. Could go back and sort of say, it's, we can't actually make black white. How are we going to do this? And what would you like to do about it? And it's all much more connected and collaboration. How do you feel?
Well, I ran quite a small company compared to the ones that I came from, but certainly collaboration. I've got another little phrase I use a lot, and I saw it a lot last week. There are a couple of team members on holiday, and with some new team members, and said, always delegate upwards.
Yes.
Delegation is not just a downwards thing. And again, that came from my world in advertising. I'd much rather know about a problem that we could solve when it's this size, rather than about it when it's this size. So I'm a big believer in upward delegation and solving problems when they're small and not when they're too big. So I we work with lots of different clients every day of the week, from businesses to charities to schools to choirs to festivals. And on the whole, I'd like to think we still see lots of good collaboration. I mean, I think there's certainly some organizations are more siloed than they need to be. And I do see discussions with certain sectors where it's like, we need to break down the silos to make things happen. And I don't know if COVID has contributed to that, with everybody working from a more, not from a central point. I do think COVID's probably not helped that cause, in terms of oiling communication, if people are all working virtually and separately. And
yeah, it depends how that was handled. At least I would imagine so, because I mean, most of my communication, I live in the back of Beyond in Shropshire, and most of my communication with people that I work with has to be through through the machine or through the phone or something, because they could be 30, 40, 50 miles away, or they could be 500 miles away, or across the ocean or something like that, which some of them are. And so I think a lot of it depends on how you're handled and how you handle the whole thing. And my woman that I'm working with marketing, and she's in Portugal. She lives in Portugal. And we have meetings across, and we WhatsApp each other and this sort of thing to get things going. But we keep the communication going. Maybe people didn't always keep the communication going.
Yeah, that's vital.
Mm,
No, it's interesting you're talking about Zoom. I've been using Zoom since 2014.
yeah,
And that's one of the big upsides for me from lockdown, because we say to clients, rather than just doing a phone call and we
yeah,
can't see what you're doing at the other end, jump on a Zoom and we'll take over your screen and we'll show you.
yeah.
Well, before the pandemic, people were very reluctant to do that. And now, of course, oh, great, yeah, we'll jump on a Zoom. And it means that they get to solve the problem even quicker.
Yes.
So I think there's definitely the upside, but I think there's still no substitute for having people round a table and all seeing the whites of your eyes together.
It is lovely, and you get a lot of feel from that, and it's very, very immediate, whereas a group of people on a screen may not feel quite the same to most
Yeah.
people at all. But where are you in the lakes, and what do you do when you're not running trybooking?
So where I'm speaking to you from right now is our head office, which is actually in Kendal. So
Right?
I'm very proud of the fact I've bought a national cloud-based digital platform to the Lake District. I really am. And actually, we had a meeting this morning. A lady just popped in. So we don't often have people just popping in. It's not that kind of office.
No.
But this lady popped in. She'd heard about us, and she was fantastic. And she's a Kendalian, but she spent many years overseas. And she wanted to use us for quite a few different things. So that was just wonderful. But so this is where the head office is, and I live in a field in a lovely part of the Lake District, about 15 minutes max from here.
Yeah.
And it's on the River Kent, which is the river that flows through Kendal and out to Morecambe Bay. And I'm in a beautiful area. So one of the main things I do when I'm not at trybooking is be with my family.
Yeah.
And my daughter of 15 and my son of 19, who's currently not in this country. We were talking about that earlier. He's back in Sydney.
Yeah.
And my husband, and we love to walk. We've
Mm.
got amazing walks right from our doorstep.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my daughter, I'm not a horsewoman at all. In fact, I was positively allergic to them. Positively allergic to them. But next door to where we live, our 10-minute walk, it's a fantastic stables. And my daughter's just got she's a complete natural with animals, and she adores horses.
Mm.
So she has this wonderful freedom. So we now get much more involved with horses. So I spend a lot of time, for example, 2 weekends ago, I was creosoting 20 jumps in a hunter trials field. And my lockdown skill was to learn to load and tow a huge animal and ferry it up and down the country, not quite up and down the country, but certainly up and down counties.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a skill set which I still can't quite believe I've mastered, because it's a bit terrifying to tow a big live animal.
Yeah.
Really, I feel a huge amount of responsibility.
Mm.
I love cooking. I love music. So get down to London or Liverpool or up to Glasgow, Edinburgh, as often as I can, to have a bit of a city splits and music or theatre. But love cooking. So my husband and I are both equally handy in the kitchen.
Did you fight over it?
We don't fight over it, but we delegate it beautifully. He'll say, I'll do this and I'll do that. I said, okay, you're on. Occasionally I have to ask him, and occasionally he has to ask me, but on the whole, it divides very nicely.
That's lovely.
And our kids are the same. Our kids love cooking. In fact, our daughter applied for the Junior Bake Off during lockdown and got through to that round 3, having interviews with Love Production. So we can often all be in the kitchen, all doing different things at the same time. We all love our food.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And I mean, Kendal and the Lake District have got some lovely food around there. I mean,
we are very spoiled.
Are amazing.
We really are very spoiled with foodies things, from things like booths, which I'm delighted are a client of trybooking. But
lovely.
They use us for their in-store events. They just did a whole load of coronation teas in store on Saturday afternoon. I've got beautiful booths. Literally, I opened the shutters, got booths here, but also the artisan producers and the restaurants were very spoiled.
They are,
yeah.
They are beautiful. I haven't been to the lakes for a long time now, but I had friends at Lancaster University in the past, and we used to come up for walking and to see them and everything. And even then it was absolutely amazing, the food. And it was also, it is such a beautiful place.
Oh, it really is breathtaking.
Mm.
And interesting, because I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Lancaster University.
Yes, what is that?
Oh, it's lovely. Oh, it's lovely. It's an opportunity you get to engage directly with the students.
Wow.
So essentially, the Entrepreneur in Residence program is run out of the management school. So Lancaster University Management School looms. And it's the whole idea that, yes, you come and do your business degrees or your MBAs, and you've got all your academics, but actually they don't really touch, unless they're doing work experience or jobs, they don't get an opportunity to touch with business people or business owners or business founders in particular. So they started this program quite a few, I mean, I've been part of it now for 6-7 years.
Wow.
And it started quite a bit before then. So let's say it's been around for well over 10 years. And it's one of the preeminent programs in the world. I mean, I even think it's bigger than Warwick's. It's more connected than Warwick's business school. So essentially, it's the university have recruited is probably the wrong word, but met up with and found entrepreneurs that can give time to students, be that giving lectures, be it giving them work experience, be it involved in research. I mean, I probably do one student interview a month. So a student will write to me and through the program and say, I'm doing a research piece on this. Could I interview for half an hour and ask this, this, and this? And go, yes, of course.
Yeah.
But the bit I love is going into the university and, you know, being invited to speak on panel discussions or give lectures and allowing them to ask lots of questions, you know, and I give life. And what I love about it more than anything is beyond the business thing, is giving them life lessons. Because one of my biggest life lessons from a university lecture was about life. It wasn't about the academics.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. It was for me too. And it's so different when you're talking to people who are out there actually doing it as well than it is when you're talking to people who have academic degrees and are thinking about it in a non-practical way, because the actual theory and the practice both are vital, but you do need to have both and you've got to mix them together. And if you're actually talking to someone who's doing it, and they can sort of say, oh, well, you know, the format for this is la 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 sort of thing, and you go, yes, but what happens if so and so? And you can set them off, can't you? And get them to think new ideas. Yeah,
no, it's wonderful. So that's what it is. It's about bringing entrepreneurs and business into the university.
Yeah,
giving them, you know, students exposure to these people.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely wonderful. I wish there should be a whole lot more of it. Joan, have you got anything particular that you want to say about trybooking? Because
I think you've said it all beautifully already.
Well, I really think everybody ought to have a go at it. And I mean, this is a British company.
It is. And so this is what I would say. I say we're a British company. You're, you know, rather than using an American platform, of which there's many out there, and Ellen's already mentioned one, you know, it's a British company. We host our data in the UK, so you're data secure. I've just had an email, just before I came on this call with Ellen, I had an email from a new charity that's looking for to work with us, and they're asking all the right questions about our data policies. So you'll have all your data held securely, so you'll be Brexit as well as EU regulation compliant.
Yeah.
As Ellen said, we love, because the platform is easy to use and it's incredibly flexible and it's great. And without it, we wouldn't have a business. But the core of our business is our customer service.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't have we wouldn't give the platform without the customer service. And the reason for that is many, and Ellen struck upon a couple. You know, events can be scary. So we want you to be able to have access to a human being to get the reassurance that you need, or to solve the problem that you're trying to solve quickly. But also, we'd be very boring. It'd be a very boring existence if we didn't get to speak to our customers. So we love it. So we really do. We've got a really thorough learning centre. We recognise not everybody wants to speak to people, which is why we have lots of other tools in place. But for those people that do like to speak to people, we're absolutely here at the end of our phone. And there's none of this, press 1 for this and press 2 for that. You literally will get a human being answer the phone and switch your phone.
Yeah. I mean, that was what was so stunning. I sort of picked it up and I was expecting the usual sort of half hour before you get anywhere near a human. And there was one immediately. And it was just so delightful.
Yes, and we're known for that. So I would say if you're running any type of site or event or course, and you're doing it all manually because you think you're saving money, well, you're not, because you absolutely won't be. I can tell you that now for lots of different reasons. And you're a bit nervous of new technology, please don't be.
Yeah.
I mean, I say to many people, have you all got an Amazon account? Most people go, yes. I go, well, trybooking is much easier to navigate than Amazon. And it's like Amazon. You open up an account and you only pay us as and when you sell tickets.
Yep.
And we've got incredibly low and transparent fees.
Yeah.
And that haven't been raised over the last 2 years, like everything else. We've kept ours as they were in 2014 when we launched.
Yeah.
So yes, please come and ask any questions you have.
Yeah, please do, because I was just amazed at how easy it is. And I just love it. And also, you actually feel as though you make friends when you talk to people. You know, you got to say, oh, hello, yeah, I spoke to you the other day. You know, yeah, that's right. Oh, you're so-and-so, aren't you? And you're so recognized and you just feel so heard. And
do you know, Ellen, I've had on quite a few occasions clients say to the team and to me, gosh, are we your only client? We feel like we're your only client because you know who we are. And when we last called, you've remembered. I said, well, I'd love to say yes, but we wouldn't have a business if you were our only client.
Exactly. If you want good service and you want it easy and you want to get your tickets and your event and almost anything about your event, including, you know, emails afterwards and email follow-ups, email beforehand, all of this stuff, it's easy.
Thank you.
It really is. And also, thank you for being on, Joan, because your life is amazing.
Oh, well, I think everybody's lives are amazing. And
I do.
I do. I think, and one thing, if I was going to leave you with something, I do think, look, life's too short and the world's too small. So if you want to go and discover new experiences or new people or new countries, get on and do it, because we all, I mean, gosh, if you know, so much has been going on recently with unexpected people leaving this planet well before their time. And I just think, you know, the 2 years of lockdown have shown us that life really is too short.
It really is. It's go for it and do it. Yeah. So thank you, Joan. And on that note, we will leave it all here. And all of Joan's connections and contacts and everything will be in the show notes. So you can get in touch.
Wonderful.
Thanks ever so much, Joan.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been really kind. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.